Empire. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Last Man Standig podcast. Yes, I'm your host, Ben Standig, and I cover the Washington Commanders for The Athletic, which means I just watched a riveting second preseason game in which the Commanders fell 13-6. But despite that paltry score, there's a lot to discuss, including the latest effort from Jayden Daniels, the latest time he got his head coach a little nervous, and some other aspects of this game, including, guys who are still trying to make this team and what they showed in this one. Joining me here, and this is going to be the plan after games this year, is my guy who's been on this podcast several times already. He's a producer extraordinaire. He's done so many great projects at The Athletic, including the Playmakers narrative podcast last year that Jordan Rodriguez did, interviewing people like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan and others. Here he is, Mike McDaniel as well, who of course is there tonight. Here he is, the great Mike Smeltz, LinkedIn hero Mike Smeltz, I should say.
Thank you, Ben. This is a true honor. I sent Ben. Listen, I am a podcast producer, so I'm like a over preparer, and I sent Ben I think 7-page document after this. It's not even a bad preseason game. It was exciting at the end. I was riveted. I was on the edge of my seat waiting to see if Trace McSorley could throw a deep ball to Martavius Bryant to put the Commanders in for maybe a tie, possibly a win, and then didn't happen. But hey, it was exciting to watch, and anything with Jayden Daniels is ultra exciting. So I'm pumped to be here.
Now, that said, you're wearing a Syracuse shirt. Did I approve this? Was this in the notes? I don't know. We're gonna have to discuss wardrobe. I mean, I'm wearing an athletic shirt. I wasn't doing that on purpose, but that's the way it broke down. Syracuse. Huh? All right. Well, we'll have to have that discussion.
I apologize deeply. I'm already offending you on my first appearance in the new version of your show, which is rocketing up the iTunes charts. But iTunes doesn't even exist. I shouldn't even say iTunes. That's how old I am.
Wait, what? iTunes doesn't exist?
No, iTunes is dead. iTunes is dead. No, it's
I
Apple
always call it
Podcast
iTunes.
or Apple Music. I know, that's what I do too. And I'm an old man.
Well, there you go. All right. So as Mike, said, and of course you've now heard me say this several times, we are getting close to the end of the standard room only feed existing. We are now doing everything over at the Last Man Standig podcast, doing that through Bram Weinstein's company, Empire Media. So we've been double dipping on both just to get everybody acclimated. But after the New England game, the last preseason game, that feed's going away for good, and it's all going to be here. The good news is a ton of you have already made the switch, and I know this because I showed this to Mike earlier. There's sites that track various metrics on podcasts to determine who's doing well, what have you. And I looked at this list earlier today. And out of every NFL podcast out there, all of them, the big ones, the Kelseys, the Mina Kimeses, all those, this podcast, Last Man Standing, number 19 out of hundreds. That's because you guys are joining up. You're leaving comments and reviews on the Apple Music page, and it's been a huge help. And I'm glad everybody is coming on board. And again, needless to say, we want you here to take this journey with us through the regular season, the final preseason game, and all that. So again, go subscribe to the Last Man Standing podcast, wherever you do it, Apple Music, Spotify. I'm a Podbean guy. Wherever you do it, subscribe, and that way you won't miss anything, and it'll make everybody on this end happy. Also, there is a YouTube page. If you go either to, I assume if you type in Last Man Standing, or if you go to Empire Media, you'll see it there. We're getting that part is, a little bit of a process, or we're just getting testing it a little bit, but the videos are already up there, including one from the other day. So with all that said, Mike, we've got some things to discuss. Tell me, where do you want to start here?
I mean, I have in our doc, and I think it's Jayden, Jahan, the kicking competition, and then I have a little bit on the offense, but we got to start with Jayden Daniels because it's, I know that, if you could be critical. Oh, he only threw for 78 yards on 12 attempts. I don't know. Things look crisp. Even this is how Jayden Daniels pilled I am, Ben. One of the two incompletions. So he was 10 for 12 with 78 yards, no touchdowns, no interceptions. The sky ball that he threw to the left sideline out of bounds, that I think Terry was the intended receiver. There was a blitz off of his right side, an overload blitz. And I am so convinced that Jayden Daniels knows what he's doing, that he did that on purpose. He just threw the ball away on purpose. And I think he said so in the post-game comments, or roughly said so, that even that incompletion was just a simple throwaway because he didn't want to go out of field goal range. Okay, yeah, 10 for 12, 78 yards, no touchdowns. I mean, it's not, there have been better Commanders, Redskin preseason performances out of quarterback. It just looks different than the other guys, the Jeff Driscoll or Trace McSorley. It was another bar that Jayden passed, but the the big question is, oh God, Ben, is this gonna be a thing where Jayden, because of his competitive nature, is putting himself in bad BAD positions because it was an RPO player design run, and he goes and he gets hit. He allows himself to get hit because he had an opportunity to get down or try to get out of bounds. And the coach, obviously DQ, said something after the game about it. But I'm it's like shades of RG3. I'm just terrified as a true Commanders fan over here.
And I was gonna say, for those of you who are not familiar, Mike is a DC DMVer Commanders fan, so he knows
Yeah.
all the history of all the things and has suffered through all that, as many of you have as well. First of all, let me just say this. So Dan Quinn post game last week, after Jayden does the audible out of the screen, and they were calling a screen basically because they had Trent Scott at one tackle and Chris Paul at the other, and they were like, we don't want to put him in harm's way. He audibles out, throws the 42-yard bomb, and that leads to Dan Quinn's epic Top Gun analogy that he goes to, right? Okay, so now I was sitting there thinking to myself, is he going to go to another movie analogy? And I was thinking, what would it be? I didn't think this one, but it works perfectly. He went to Animal House and said that Jayden is now on double secret probation, because of the non-slide. He's joking, and Jayden was joking about it afterwards, says, it's a fine line between, making a play and being aggressive and getting down. But it's like a little kind of joke between the two of us. And, it's good that it's that at the moment. But, and I'm not sending off any alarms. I've been very impressed to date with Jayden Daniels, today included. But yes, there is that line of his inclination is clearly to be aggressive. I talked to Cliff Kingsbury the other day at the Miami practice, and he told me that, yeah, I mean, we want to attack on this with this offense. He's perfect for this because that's how his nature is. But at the same time, you got to know when to get down. And like, I don't know if you saw it, but like during, I think it was last week, we had Kingsbury talking to the media, and he was asked about sliding, and he goes, "Oh yeah, he will, he will, he will." That's like a quote. He's like, "We've talked about it a lot. He will." Then he didn't. So he did get the first down, but he didn't slide. So it'll be interesting to see going forward. I'm not going to hit the RG3 panic button or anything like that, but needless to say, this is one of the big questions with him is, I keep calling those hits we saw at LSU cartoonish. He seemed to bounce back and not deal with serious injury, but at some point you got to get concerned. Okay. So that said, I thought he was pretty efficient. You mentioned there's not a ton of yards. Most of the passes are really kind of underneath. There's no game planning here, so I don't know what they were trying to do. I know Kingsbury didn't want to show a lot. He wanted to play up tempo. They certainly did that. And the throws, underneath throws, 3 to De'Ami Brown on the first drive. You mentioned Terry, et cetera. So, I think he was effective and efficient, and he, no interceptions. He largely made the right decisions. It looked like, perhaps, other than the non-slide. So I thought it was a pretty good performance. Dan Quinn seemed to say the same as well. Obviously, points are important, but it doesn't matter right now, especially when you're not showing the full arsenal of what you're doing.
And I'll just have like, okay, again, like for the people that want to be like, he didn't do anything, like he just hit curls and in break, like just simple routes. I just want people to remember what some of the other younger quarterbacks who have been here and their inability to throw to like half the other side of the field or their inability just to hit those simple routes. Like, okay, so we have seen that, right? Now, the funny thing is, the big deal in the draft process, besides the fact that Jayden would get demolished by defenders when he would be running in the field, was that the stat that would be thrown out was that he didn't throw to the middle of the field. And there was a key play in, because I do want to talk about Cliff's offense for a little bit, because I think I wonder if he's revealing more than, not that he doesn't want to, but he's revealing something, right? He's showing RPO, he's showing QB run game. But Jayden threw a pass in the middle of the field off of RPO to Bates, which was in the middle of the field. And I remember I replayed the moment because it was so reminiscent of the Shanahan RG3 offense when, I mean, what made RG3 so amazing, of course, was his running ability. But then when he would put the ball in the gut of the running back, pull it back, the linebackers would be sucked to the front of the defensive line, and there'd be this wide open 20-yard area in the middle of the field to throw to whoever would be there for then the Redskins. And it was the same thing for John Bates. It was a perfect pass. I think it was 16 yards. And it's like, this is, again, it's little stuff, but it's just he's doing the right things, right? So we're seeing the right things. We're seeing the things that would indicate that he is probably going to be the starter. I don't know if there's much debate about that. And I do want to ask you, this is probably going too far ahead, Ben, but like, is Jayden going to play in this third game? Probably not, right? Don't you think that this is like,
Yeah, I think this is
they'll
it. I
put
mean,
him on
look,
ice?
Dan Quinn, I thought he was going to play John Allen and Deron Payne and Bobby Wagner based on some of the things he said this week. He doesn't. Other guys sat, which were either not a big deal or a couple guys might be banged up. But yeah, I mean, look, even Jayden only played 2 series. It did go into the second quarter, but it was only 2 series. Caleb Williams played the entire first half today for the Bears. It was like 5 or 6 drives. So, because they weren't succeeding early. So, no, I can't comprehend Jayden is going to play. In this finale, and that's to the point of like why Dan Quinn is like, what are you doing here with the change of the play and the non-slide? Because the injury aspect of this is the most. They've had these 2 joint practices now, and that really is where they're getting. I can't say the most value because obviously game action is game action, but they think they're getting a lot of value out of these, and a lot of teams think these joint practices are good. So no, I don't. I can't imagine any starter of note is going to be in that game, uh, let alone Jayden Daniels. To your point earlier though about like is Kingsbury showing a lot here? So when they played Miami the other day, one thing that was fascinating was watching Miami. They're just like we're just going to do what we do. They didn't seem to be too worried about whatever the bug, whatever they might be giving away because people know who they are. They got to get ready for what they do. Now, Washington, one advantage they have at the start is nobody quite knows what they're going to do. But, I've asked this of Kingsbury before. What's that balance between not showing, but you guys have to work on what you do too? And I think the up-tempo aspect is a good example of this. Like, you can't, it's one thing to like work on practices, but the speed of it, you have to in game when your heart's pumping and things are happening, you got to get going. And I think do need to practice that. So I think that's the one thing they've shown the most that, again, but if you know Kingsbury, I don't think it's a huge surprise. But you can't hide everything. And they had 3 receiver sets, 4 receiver sets, 12 personnel, all these kinds of things. Again, you have to work on you at some point. You can't worry about the rest of the world. So I don't think they've shown a ton, but at the same point, you can't be so vanilla that you haven't even got, especially for a new team. It's one thing if it would say, you know, uh, peak Aaron Rodgers with the Packers where they've done it over and over and over again. This isn't that. So I think they're okay, but obviously we'll see what happens in the first couple games.
Yeah, and it's funny because it's like I think if you interview 1,000 NFL coaches, are the Commanders going to run RPO and QB run game? They
Of
would all say
course.
yes. A
Yes.
thousand out of zero, right?
Right.
And it's like actually showing a little bit of it. I mean, one, it kind of doesn't change minds, and also it like makes the other teams to begin to prepare for it. And pretty much every team runs QB run game in RPO. Like on some, there's various levels, whether you do it a lot or you do a little bit. like most quarterbacks are now mobile. Like we saw, I mean, I know you saw the highlights of Caleb Williams today. Like every quarterback, Drake May ran for a touchdown in the Patriots preseason game. Like every quarterback coming into the NFL now is going to run. So I guess it's not really revealing too much. I was just surprised that they would even put Jayden in any position to get hit because it's so obvious with the pass patterns that they're running. Like today, everything was a 5 yard route besides, like maybe a couple of like maybe two plays for Jayden the first team offense. And it's like because they're not doing that because that's their offense. They're doing that because they don't want Jayden to get hit. They just want the rhythm. They want the get out of the huddle, all that stuff. That's why
Right.
they're doing that. I think the plays are almost superfluous for them. It's like they just want to do all the other stuff, and whatever happens in the play kind of like is what happens.
Right. No, and I agree. That's
Yeah.
what I'm saying. I think the up tempo part they need to do, but then once the ball is hiked, it doesn't matter if the ball's going 30 yards down the field or three. And also, I think that part of it, the downfield passing, is where they can show more, and maybe that starts to give things away. Last week he did throw the 42-yarder to Diami, but other than that, they were, wasn't a ton down the field either. So all things considered, again, I think Jayden Daniels continues to stand out to me, and it's the aspects we're not even talking about, how he fits within the locker room, his vibe, like watching him post game. He's got a steady smile to him. He just he understood why people were asking about the the non-slide, but he didn't take it seemingly as like, oh, everybody's giving me grief, leave me alone. He's like, yeah, like he gets it, and I think that's a very important piece to all this. And again, it's pretty apparent that they really trust him. And I think I said this on the podcast the other day, but when I talked to Kingsbury the other day, and we talked about that last week, the decision to switch the play, and I asked him if my take was that it shows a lot of confidence in that he has in himself. And there are a lot of rookies I've covered in different sports where they come in and have no confidence. Some guys never recover, to be honest. Like they can't find that. He's got that. He's got that gear. And I asked Kingsbury about that, and he goes, "Yeah, that was a huge takeaway for him as well." And he tells Jayden, "Look, you're on the field. I'm not. I can tell you what I think we should do and all that, but if you see opportunities, I don't want you to even think twice. Do what you need to do. You're out there. I trust in your decision making. Go for it." So I think that says a lot about where he's at as a rookie. Again, this is only preseason and practices, but so far, so good for Jayden Daniels, despite
Yeah.
the non slide.
And the big story like going into this game besides Jayden is like Jahan Dotson. And a lot of actually what your questions to Dan Quinn, your reporting in terms of is Dotson, going into this year, it was like, okay, they have Terry and Dotson's number two, right? But there is more of a battle for that number two slot. And Dan Quinn talked about that after the game. But just to do the tally, De'Ami Brown had 3 receptions for 19 yards, and he was like crucial in that early Jayden Daniels drive. Jahan Dotson had 1 reception for 3.
And
Zacchaeus, yeah,
I'd say one of Daniel's two incompletions was to Jahan. And I don't want to get starting overly nitpicky with these kinds of things, but
yeah,
I rewound and watched that play. It looked to me Jahan, so there's two receivers left. Jahan's the inside receiver. The receivers sort of, cross each other. He cuts hard, inside or towards the sideline. It did seem though that once he made the cut, he didn't go. He seemed to slow up a little bit, and the throw was inbounds. The throw was there, but Jahan wasn't. And I'm guessing, if I had to guess, that Jayden was throwing to a spot that Jahan, if he's moving faster, wasn't there. Again, I don't know, but that was just my observation. And
yeah.
based when
I
you hear
saw
what,
that too, Ben. I thought the throw looked what would be a catchable ball
yeah,
depending on the route, right?
yeah, I mean, like you said, the one to Terry, that was like, out of bounds and whatever. But this one, and even some of the throws Jayden made that were completions, like the John Bates one, he had to kind of go low to get it. But it was fine. It was there. That's the receiver's got to make his play, and Jahan didn't. So, yes, I mean, I don't know that anything happened today changed the competition aspect, but that's probably not great for Jahan if that's the case, because it has started to feel like he's the one who's got to have to to catch up. And I did want to just make this point. I think this is obvious, but I don't know that everybody sees this. You know, Jahan Dotson, Curtis Samuel was at times felt like their most productive receiver last year, and he was at least the second most productive to Terry, but he was not the number two receiver. The number of plays essentially kind of dictates it. Jahan played 911 snaps last year. Curtis was under 600. Jahan Dotson was the number two receiver. Why his numbers weren't as good? That's a separate topic. He was the guy. So this is about him keeping his job. It's not about competing to get the job. He had this job, and now it appears, at least he had it previously, right? I mean, maybe Dan Quinn never saw it, but from our perception, so he's competing to keep his job, not trying to get the job. I do think that's a distinction in why this is more notable. Because if somebody was just out playing him, that'd be one thing, but he seems to be sliding back. And, I've talked about this already, but at some point here may come to a point where they have to decide, hey, if he's not going to be one of our top three receivers, do we look to trade him because he's still in a rookie contract and he doesn't play special teams, et cetera. So we'll see what happens here. And, if the starters don't play, is he even in the last game? I don't know, but he's also maybe not a starter, so maybe he is.
Yeah, I mean, and it's kind of there's two sides of this argument, which is like, okay, this is a Cliff Kingsbury offense. This offense is probably going to go four wide more than any team in the NFL. I know he changed things a little bit as he got on his time in Arizona. They started loading up on tight ends, but like ultimately, Cliff Kingsbury is going to put 3 to 4 wide receivers out there more often than most teams. So like if Jahan, Zacchaeus, and Brown and Terry are all out there for the same, it doesn't really matter who's wide receiver two. But Dan Quinn said something interesting post game because he was trying to purposefully clarify how he's viewing the wide receiver two battle. And he said something essentially like the thing that he's liked about Dotson are sort of the deeper routes. And they're not even calling deeper routes. So maybe this is a percept. I mean, you're at practice, so you see this more than anyone else, besides the coaches. But for fans like myself, who's just sitting here watching the game, there's a perception that Jahan is not doing well, but also they're not throwing the routes that would probably feature him better. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, like, there's a possibility that when we get to the regular season, sure, Jahan's not going to be the wide receiver that when he was drafted, the hope was that he would be like a very dynamic, very versatile weapon. Like, when he was drafted, it was like he's amazing hands, great route runner, great speed, all those things. And maybe he's not that, but maybe he's the guy who gets like 600 yards receiving this year and 4 touchdowns, and he's a piece of this puzzle in the way that it's like that it makes sense versus not being just someone who isn't productive at all. I know I think it's a possibility. We're not seeing it in the preseason, just to be honest.
Yeah, no, and I've made this point that the first week or so of training camp, Jahan definitely looked off. Then he started to pick it up, like maybe it was like the second week or so, and he said it was in part because as the installs were coming in more and more, they were getting the plays down the field were becoming more in play, and that's where he started to take off. But then, despite that, it seemed like he was finding his stride. He plays 32 snaps in the opener. I don't know yet how many he played in this game, but he was there at least deep into the first half at least. So, yeah, something is off. I think, and I've used this analogy. I'll do my best to stop using it after this. But I told everybody the other day, on the flight to Miami, I watched the movie Miracle for the 80th time. Fantastic movie. Don't tell me otherwise.
Yeah.
But there was the part where they have this training camp. They got to pick the 80 guys there, whatever it is, and the Herb Brooks character, the Kurt Russell playing, he hands his assistant a list and says, "Here's the list." And he goes, "What do you mean? We just started." He goes, "They're not even some of the best players on here." And he said, "I'm not looking for the best players. I'm looking for the right players." And I do think in the case of how the Commanders have gone about their offseason, they didn't sign guys to big contracts. They signed veterans specifically to bring an attitude and help change the culture here. It wasn't about necessarily finding the best players, so to, quote unquote. It was finding the right players for where this team is. And I feel this is where Jahan is falling short. That he doesn't, I don't know what it does. I don't think he's not like a malcontent or anything, but whatever it's his competitiveness, I think he's getting, he's obviously a small guy. I think he's getting thrown when he's getting contact. I think maybe that's frustrating them a little bit. Whatever it is, something is off. And I feel that's where this is about. Again, we'll have to hear from Dan Quinn in a couple days as to what he thought of, not just for Jahan, the whole tape, and get his view from that. But yeah, I don't think this game helped his cause from what I could see.
Can I ask you, so just to clear, so if you stop watching this game in the half, Luke McCaffrey played mostly in the second half. He didn't really play much in the first half. Jameson Crowder got his receptions in the second half, not in the first half. We did see Martavius Bryant. He actually forced a fumble, uh, which is not what you expect to be the first Martavius Bryant play as a commander, but that's what he did. They tried so desperately to get Luke McCaffrey to return a punt, and the Dolphins or situation just wouldn't allow it. Is there anything to take away from McCaffrey, Crowder, or honestly just seeing Martavius Bryant out there? Just a large. It was nice to see a large human playing wide receiver because they have very few large humans playing wide receiver.
Well, in terms of the receiver room, I think last week and this week has been an indication to me that they are trying to find somebody else to return punts besides Jamison Crowder. Jamison Crowder is an absolutely solid guy to have on your team, good for the locker room. We see, whenever which wasn't often last year, but even here, whenever he goes and plays receiver, he can help your cause. Like, yeah, he's not going to be a burner, but he can help your cause. Okay. But as we saw as a punt returner last year, it's kind of basic. He had the same production as Dax Milne. He's over 30. That's not where this team is trending. They're looking to get younger. So I think they're trying to find somebody else to do it. Now, Zacchaeus last week seemed to make a little more sense. Not that he has had a ton of experience in the NFL returning punts, but with his speed, McCaffrey's a very different type of player. So I thought that was very interesting that they were trying him. And, like in most of these cases, it's going to be trial and error, and they'll see. They tried Kazmir Allen in the backfield. I told you guys the other day to expect something like that. And they also had him return. He returned 2 kicks and 2 punts. They're trying to find a way to get him on this roster, I think. But I
Do
think
you
all
think
the
the fumble hurts him? I mean, like
sure.
it should you would expect it to, but like also he's not been a running back, so I don't know what to take from that.
Yeah, I think they recognize obviously that it is a big experiment. Maybe he doesn't ultimately end up at running back. I think it's just they're trying to find a way to get him the ball on offense. And the reality is, if you're a receiver, okay, well, the only way to get you the ball is to throw the ball to you, which means you have to get open, you have to catch it possibly in traffic or with defenders around you. And he's 5 foot nothing, and that's not really his game. So I think they're trying to find ways to get him the ball other ways out of the backfield. Probably not like a true running back, but a sort of a gadgety kind of a guy. But I think all that is to say they are really trying to find somebody who they hope will make this team to be the returners at both kick returner and punt returner, rather than having to have one spot specifically for a returner like a Crowder. Maybe Byron Pringle falls under that as well. So I think that's what they're trying to do here with all these different guys. And I don't think I could be wrong on this. I don't know that battle was changed one way or the
No.
other by this game either. So
Yeah, I mean, to say, and this is going to fold into our next big. I mean, if you turn off the game in halftime, you feel a certain way about Riley Patterson. I mean, probably you still feel it if you watch the whole game, but I am worried about the team's special teams that if you kind of look around, besides Tressway, who's the constant, in life, he's gravity for the Commanders. Like kicker is not good, and punt returner and kick returner is so up in the air that you don't know if they're going to go for someone who can just simply catch the ball and fall down, or if they're trying to get the Kaz Allen type who like could do something with it, but also may not do that much with it. Like may not be ultimately that much more impactful than someone like Jamison Crowder being back there. And Jamison Crowder, I almost can guarantee it would be more impactful as a receiver, like across an entire season, because he's just that kind of dude who'll catch a ball. He'll get you the 8 yards on the 3rd and 7. He'll just get that. He'll fall down, and that's what you get out of Jamison Crowder. But to go to special teams overall and Riley Patterson, there was a nice moment during after the halftime on TV broadcast. Dan Quinn was asked about like Riley Patterson. So Patterson had missed 2 field goals, wide left and wide right, which is terrifying. And DQ had went up to Riley and gave him a word of encouragement. And you actually saw him do it too with Kaz Allen when Kaz Allen fumbled the ball, which is like Dan Quinn goes up to the player and, like tries to get him out of the negative thoughts that he may be having. Um, Honestly, like Jayden Daniels is the headline of the game because it's Jayden Daniels. It is interesting since Jahan Dotson, we had to talk Jahan Dotson, but like really the headline of the game is the kicking game because
Well,
that could kill
yeah.
the
So
team this year.
two quick things about the special teams, like you just said. One, look, I don't mean to tell anybody how to do their job. The guy who is he's the host for like the Commanders internal stuff that they do. He was the sideline reporter. I would be terrible at that job. But you get Dan Quinn, you ask him two questions. You can't ask about the kicker and what about the second half? No. Go away. Two questions about Jayden Daniels or Jayden Daniels, and then pick anything else, like whatever it is, what the receiver, whatever.
I defend the asking about Riley Patterson because
Oh,
it was like
well, that can be the
what
second question, and you have
second
to
question.
ask
Jayden
about
Daniels
Jaden
has to be the
Daniels in
first.
some
Yeah,
capacity. But okay,
you're right.
but I think you make a good point, and this is why I like having you on this podcast because you always say something that makes me think. And what you just said was, do they possibly just want somebody back in the returner spot who's just there to fair catch the ball, basically? And that's kind of what happened the last 2 years, right? Between Dax Milne, just only was fair catching. He was fine. He didn't fumble, but there was no
A handsome man just fair
yeah.
catching. That's what he
And,
does.
and Crowder did have the really one long run last year, but generally
Yeah.
speaking, he didn't do too much else. It was just about security. I think this is a good example of how these two different staffs think very differently. The last staff was very conservative in numerous ways across the board with how they built the roster, with how they made moves, etc. So having a guy just there to catch the ball makes perfect sense. These guys are complete opposite. They are aggressive. They want to go for it. Now, obviously, you can't just be aggressive for the sake of being aggressive. You need to have guys that can do the job. But that's the thing. They're looking for the guy to be the playmaker. They're not looking for the guy to just catch the
Mm.
ball. And I do think that says something broadly about where this staff is compared to the last one.
Yeah, that's a good thing to point out because as a fan, I'm like I'm like I just want like at some point like if I'm not seeing the answer clearly, like one we did not see Luke McCaffrey get to return a punt. Now, B. Mitch was on the broadcast, and B. Mitch, I've heard him say this 1,000 times, but like Luke caught the ball at the 5 yard line, and Brian Mitchell's like, if you stand at the 10, and if you start trailing backwards, you just let the ball go. Um, Now Luke McCaffrey was a quarterback essentially 2 years ago, right? So he is not his brother who has always been a skill position player, essentially always been a skill position player. This is still a new thing for him, and I don't know how many punts or kickoffs that he's returned in his career, so it's a little different. Um, I would love for this team to have returning juice because the it is such. I mean, to go back to some of the best teams, if you think about Baltimore and the Patriots under Belichick, like getting whether having a great punter, having a great kicker, or having a great return game, those are like those hidden yards that really end up mattering in a game. And we've seen so many times with this team recently under Ron Rivera, which was like they would get nothing in the return game, and then maybe they would get a good return, but then there'd be a hold anyway, so it would be negated. And this team isn't quite talented enough not to have nothing in special teams. And Ben, I'm not going to let you go on this. What are they? Are you texting right now about Riley Patterson? What are we going to get? We need to know, Ben, because you can't. I'm sorry. He seems like a swell fella. You can't have him be the kicker, right? Like you need competition. Like if there's not a tweet from Ben Standig at it's Sunday, August 18th. If I don't see it in 3 hours that they're bringing in kicker competition, I'm going to be disappointed because they weren't even hard kicks. They were what I think they were both inside. They're definitely both inside the 50, maybe both inside the 40. Wide left, wide right. Can't have that.
Yeah.
Preseason. Come
I
on.
mean, so look, I mean, I've been saying for weeks, I mean, from the moment Brandon McManus
Yeah.
was booted off the island essentially, to me it became apparent that they were already like kind of screwed. They were going to have to wait for other teams that have multiple kickers in camp to start cutting somebody. And some teams may not do that until they get all the way till the end, depending on what their situation is. Maybe it'll be this week. Who knows? But, some of the guys who they might be eyeing will have to wait. Now, Patterson was a starting, he was a kicker last year. He replaced McManus in Jacksonville. He was okay. I mean, he's done it. The other kid, Ahmed, God bless him, but he was getting cut for Chris Blewett essentially
God, I would take Chris Blewett in a second with what's happening right now.
So the reason they cut Ahmed this past week was because they wanted to give Patterson all the reps, get him to a rhythm. And as Dan Quinn noted after the game today, he was good in the joint practice. He was 6 for 6. Quinn said a bunch of those were from deep. That's of course a practice, not a game, and things are different. But my assumption would be, this is just a guess, that so here's part of the problem is there's not a lot of kickers out on the street. I haven't looked to see the waiver wires if anybody's been cut over here over the last 48 hours. I think there have been a couple names, but I don't know what they think. So it won't stun me if they bring somebody else in. But again, they're just trying to get through, I think, at this point, the whole process, work on their kicking, the coverage, and dealing with these new rules, and wait until somebody else gets cut. Is Joey Sly going to get released by New England because New England already has Maryland great Chad Ryland? We'll see. I know that when they faced the Jets last week, the Jets, their second kicker, I think it's like Austin Siebert. He's somebody, I had people tell me they think he could be a kicker. We'll see. They'll get somebody else. I don't know if it's this week or next week or before week 1, but I would be surprised if Riley Patterson is the guy.
Should we go to some of the fun segments real quick?
Yeah, go for it.
Okay, so we have some segments. We're going to try to do these every week. Now, Ben, for you, even if you've already pointed out some of these things, we're going to redo them here because this next one, the ear-catching post-game comment. So it'd be anything that was said in the post-game, even if we talked about it before, I think it's worth pointing out what it was and what is the thing that stood out to you from the post-game.
Well, so, I'm not in Miami, so all I saw was a little bit of Dan Quinn and Jayden Daniels speaking at the podium, and I mostly heard Quinn. I go back to the Animal House reference. One, this is tickling my he's hit my sweet spot. I mean, Dan Quinn and I are roughly the same age, and all his references are going to work perfectly for me. The TikTok kids, you're not going to get them. This is for me. I like the fact that he was being playful about it for the second week in a row about Daniels doing something where he's like, okay, but it's a good way to handle it, right? He's not scowling. How dare you not do what we tell you to do and blah, blah, blah. Like that would be the wrong approach for the modern athlete. And just, come on, don't be a bore. Don't be a Scrooge. So I think that's a good sign to see how he's handling these things. And, there's always teachable moments and things like that. So let's see what happens now going forward. Again, I don't think Daniels plays in the next game, in the last preseason game, but, how does this go forward? I mean, Quinn is giving him rope, which I think from the relationship perspective for Daniels, I think he's got to be he said afterwards, hey, it's great. Or he said it during the broadcast. He said, hey, it's great. They're trusting in me. They let me through, he threw the ball 12 times in 2 series. That's pretty good. So I think that relationship is forming. I think they're clearly bonding. I think that's all good. But at the same point, Dan Quinn, with these comments, is also saying, I mean, he's asked about it. He didn't say it blind, on his own, but like he's letting everybody know, look, not perfect, but it's not a federal crime. It's not that big of a deal. And we'll see what happens. So I like the way he's handling it, and the quote itself. For those, I assume that quote, the double secret probation.
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, what do I know?
Yeah, I'm not so. I'm not...
Well, Animal House is not exactly a recent movie. I mean, I've seen it 100 times, but
yeah. I mean, I'm scared. I'm scared to death. I think a lot of Commanders fans were just every time Jayden's in the open field, we're just scared to death because we've seen it. The fact is actually he was pretty healthy in college. And so it's not RG3 where RG had like clear health issues from college. He tore his leg in college. So I am holding my breath. I do what I like about it though is that with Jayden, he is aware. He's almost doing it like in the way that there's this old story about Andrew Luck where he would, like a lot of quarterbacks would do this, but like Andrew Luck would purposefully the first chance he could, he would try to run the ball as a quarterback to get hit because that's how he would wake up. And Jayden, there's like a awareness that like I am he almost like feels like he needs to put his body out there. Now the quarterbacks who do that typically are the ones getting hurt, i.e. Andrew Luck. But there's an element to it that's going to rally the team. It's obviously going to make plays. Okay, next segment. This is my new favorite one. I don't know if I told you I named it this. This is our like who's rising, who's falling segment. This is Hogs and Frogs, Ben. Hogs and Frogs. Okay.
I got it. How I get the hogs. Frogs
Hogs
ride
are
with the
good.
hogs.
Frogs are bad. Oh,
No,
those we don't.
yeah.
So,
Sorry, Kermit.
I don't know. I mean, not to be Riley Patterson's a frog. Um, someone who we haven't mentioned yet, Jamin Davis. What a hog. Jamin Davis. Tell us about Jamin Davis, Ben. What did you think?
So okay, so he has the strip sack, and you can tell watching him as I have over the course of going back to OTAs and now here and the practices and these games, you can see him improving with his you can see him being more comfortable. His aggressiveness is coming out, and all that's true. Here's my issue.
Oh no, are you going to ruin the Jamin Davis? The team just if you didn't watch the game, Jamin Davis had a wonderful strip sack in the third quarter against either Mike White or Skylar Thompson of the Miami Dolphins, and it was a fantastic play. The sideline erupts for the Commanders, and now Ben is about to pop the balloon of the Jamin Davis hype train.
Well, all
See,
I'm going to say is so, as people know, like I have not had him on my 53 the last two times I've done one of these. Now, the Jordan McGee injury, we still don't know how severe it is. This knee injury, he didn't play today. That could possibly shake things up, and who knows what else happens on the injury front. Hopefully nothing, but we'll see. But here's the thing, right? Okay, so Dorrance Armstrong, Cleveland Farrell, who also didn't play today. Then you've got Dante Fowler. KJ Henry to me has looked pretty good throughout the summer. I've liked where he's at. That's four. Javante, crap.
Javante Jean Baptiste,
Yes, sorry. Yes, blank. I was gonna say. I keep saying the
the
Notre
Notre
Dame kid.
Dame seventh rounder. Yeah,
He
who
he
also had
he
a nice play today.
he also had a sack, and he also is playing ahead of Jamin Davis, and he's
Mm,
also their
hmm.
draft pick. So that's five defensive ends I just named. If assuming
Yep.
that they all make it, like, okay, well, like if they keep Fedarian Mathis, that's 10 defensive linemen you'd be keeping. I'm not saying that's impossible. I'm just saying that's a lot, and you now would have to scale back somewhere else. So my question is basically whatever Jamin Davis is doing, do they have a spot for him? I don't know that I think that. So again, and also Jamin Davis, I don't know who the Miami tackle was, but third team tackle guy. It's not, he wasn't going up against the higher guy. So look, again, he's improving. And I mentioned this the other day that listening to the way Dan Quinn is talking about Jahan Dotson is very different than the way he's talking about Jamin Davis and Emmanuel Forbes. He's saying, "Hey, look, sure, they're whatever, they're learning this, that, and the other, but they've been very complimentary of how they're doing it. Jamin Davis isn't balking about this switch. Forbes is working hard, whatever. Jahan, it was much more like, well, we're in a competition, we'll see. So I think they do like Jamin. And I feel his chances have improved in my head over the last few days, but at the same time, I just don't know how he's getting on this team. Especially, also he doesn't play special teams, so I still think he faces a bit of an uphill climb. But needless to say, it was a good performance from him from what we could see, and that's good signs for his growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think the only way, I mean, we obsess about who makes the 53, and then if you really look back on the people
It
that the players that people were pissed about, like who really did well, like
this is
who's
this is the story of my life, obsessing over things that are completely irrelevant. That this is what I do well.
I will say, actually, I did have a bit I was gonna do for you, which was like, I don't know where I was gonna make the line of demarcation, but let's say in the Snyder era, okay, I think who's Nate Sudfeld is probably a top five quarterback draft pick by the Commanders
Mm-hmm.
because he's 30 years old. He's still playing in the NFL. He's like the third stringer for the Lions, and he was a guy that they agonized over, that they eventually cut. Then he went to the Eagles and blah blah blah. And like I think he's the one guy that the team actually cut besides cutting kickers because they thought they were bad, like Gano, and then of course went on to be like amazing kickers. Um, yeah, Jamin Davis, like the funny thing is about him is that if you stack up his athletic profile, it is a good rush end, but they also have KJ Henry, Andre Jones, like they have a bunch of dudes who technically have like the same skill set and they've been defensive ends.
But
But
again, special
he
teams.
made the play. He's a
Oh,
playmaker,
good,
Ben.
kudos to
Hey.
him. Well, I'll be curious to see. I couldn't tell. Like, if he's not playing a lot on special teams,
Yeah.
I don't think he played much at all last week. I'm talking about like covering and blocking, not the field goals and stuff. If he's not doing that, then they're not trying to develop him in that way, and to me, that doesn't bode well because he's not in the higher rotation. But any event, yeah, Jamin Davis made some good plays. He's making it more tough on them if there is a debate. So kudos to him for doing that.
Do you have any hogs or frogs yourself, or should I keep going on my list?
Well, one hog I would say is Tyler Owens.
Yeah.
Undrafted free agent safety from the beginning of training camp. I'll be honest, I didn't maybe notice him a ton at the early part of it, but there's a lot going on here. Watching Jayden Daniels in the drafted rookies, he forces you to pay attention to him. He is constantly making plays as a defensive back, as a in return in the kick and punt return situations. He one play that stood out today. There was a play where Miami threw the ball to a receiver. A guy broke down the field. He's going to run in for a touchdown, and Owens comes from not. I'm not saying it was Darrell Green chasing down Tony Dorsett,
It
but
was
it was.
basically Darrell Green chasing down Tony
Yeah, I
Dorsett.
mean,
It
he
was
kind
that
of,
great. No, no,
and yeah, he. I don't know how he's not making the team at this point. Um,
So who isn't going to make the team, Ben?
well that becomes the issue again here. Are you keeping seven safeties? Is somebody going somewhere else? Are they going to truly move Dominic Hampton, the linebacker? I don't think so, but yeah. So I think he's putting himself on this team, and again, it's an example of looking for the right guys. His presence, his demeanor, his tone, that is what they want. I don't know. Maybe he's not the best in coverage. He was undrafted, right? That's not like we're saying this was like some great player, but he's making the plays and making the kind of plays that they're looking for. So I think he's definitely one of the hogs here for me.
I have a frog, Andrew Wiley, not to be mean. Two penalties, then negated two first downs on a good drive. They didn't play the replay of the holding call, so I didn't know if it at what I'm not gonna I don't have the tape to analyze it, but not that's the offensive line overall was fine with Jayden Daniels, but it's hard to really tell. He would be a frog for me. I did have Javante Jean Baptiste, Jeff Driscoll hog, right? Like showed what he is, which is he's an athletic quarterback who's not always accurate but can make some plays, and that's what he was as your third quarterback. It's pretty good. And
I
legs for weapons.
Yeah, it's been somewhat of one of our like running jokes sort of at camp is that at some point I was like, I'm not going to sleep on Jeff. I'm not going to just dismiss Jeff Driscoll because he's like a journeyman guy. I'm like, there's something here. I had somebody tell me once that of the quarterbacks in camp that they think not not the 40 if we're at the combine, but in terms of a 10-yard split, that Jeff Driscoll is the fastest guy of all the quarterbacks, including Jayden. And you saw his athleticism today. The comment that they made that he got drafted was by the Red Sox, having never played baseball because they just thought the athlete was that good. Now, again, he's been around the league. I'm not saying he's a guy, but like, look, my frustration with Mariota, and it's been borne out in watching him in camp, is uh when he holds the ball a long time and then often runs. Driscoll, maybe to a fault at times, is going to put the ball in harm's way, but he's going to be aggressive and throw the ball. And when he runs, he's I think a better athlete than Mariota at this point of their career. So I'm not saying he's the two or that Mariota's gone, but I am saying factor in that teams around the league always need quarterbacks. I think I would keep him unless there's like we're talking about you can't keep everybody here, right? I think there's a world I might keep him in part because maybe ultimately I would want to use him over Mariota, especially if depending on where the team is, like he'll be aggressive. And then, like I said, simultaneously, injuries happen. He's a guy that has started at least one game in like 5 of his 6 years. I for what he is, again, not starting him, not buying his jersey, none of that stuff. I'm just saying for what he is, I like the quarterbacks who are confident and aggressive. He's got that with athleticism. So yeah, I would put him as a hog, and I'm very curious to see if they think he's going to be worthy of keeping. This is assuming like Sam Hartman either goes on IR or just they think he can go to practice squad.
And not to, this is like way down the line. This is like too football-y, but some teams have had quarterbacks be like their designated keeper quarterback, meaning like to do QB sneaks. Particularly, you have it if your quarterback's fragile. And and Mariota could do that too, but like Driscoll has always been athletic. Yeah, that like he said, like he's always been athletic. He has produced some in the NFL. I'm not. I was. I've never been on board with the Mariota signing. I think it's the move that Adam Peters made that was the most questionable. But obviously, we haven't seen much of Mariota, so like it's hard for me to bash it. I will ask, local kid Trace McSorley. He came, he was throwing again. He was throwing to Martavius Bryant, two people that were not on this team essentially a week ago. They were leading a almost game-winning drive at the end. I'm not going to label him a hog or a frog, but Ben, is there anything that we should take away from Trace McSorley's performance? Like, should we project it forward and say, oh, this is the Kirk Cousins to Jayden's RG3? Is that what you're saying in theathletic.com?
That will be in the April 1st edition, perhaps. No, look, I mean, Quinn said he didn't even practice and have to get thrown in there. One of the reasons they signed him was he had been with Kingsbury in Arizona, so in theory he would at least know what's going on. But no, I mean, look, if you're a
Pretty
quarterback,
awesome. Pretty awesome for not practicing, right?
yeah,
That was
no,
pretty
for
good.
sure. It was like the crap. Who was the quarterback that they picked up off the street? It took like 24 hours before they
Josh
faced the Eagles.
Johnson.
No, I'll think about it in a second. But when they had the
Was
COVID,
this
like,
under Jay?
no,
Or
this was like 2 years ago in Iran when everybody had COVID, or 3 years ago when everybody had COVID, and he came in off the street and wasn't actually that bad. And like, I'll think of it in a minute.
oh
Um,
yeah,
but in
yeah.
any event, no, I
This
mean,
kills me.
Trace McSorley is, I guess you could say, like, if hypothetically, I don't know how, I'm told that Sam Hartman's injury is not that significant, but that said, an injury is a good opportunity to stash a guy if you want to. And should they do that, then maybe McSorley is a guy you put on your practice squad because he can, help, whatever in practice, or, again, he knows the system. If you're getting down to your fourth quarterback, you're already hosed anyway. So maybe that, but no, otherwise, appreciate the effort.
Yeah, I would really like to see. It was the Garrett Gilbert.
Garrett Gilbert, there you
Okay,
go.
yeah. Um, so okay. That was Hogs and Frogs. Can be sponsored by a brand. That's a sponsorable segment. Next one up. This is something I'm very proud of, Ben. And we're going to talk through it a little bit, and we'll get through it during the regular season. The Jayden Daniels dial. The Jayden Daniels dial. This will be our grading system for how Jayden performed. The dial, I'll tweet it out at some point. It's a picture of Jayden's head with a surrounded by a dial, and there are 5 quarterbacks on that dial. The quarterbacks may change from game to game, but right now it's Wentz at the bottom, Todd Collins, who I love dearly, Brad Johnson, RG3 as a rookie, and Doug Williams after the Super Bowl. The iconic shot of him like fist pumping, and every Commanders fan, Redskins fan could just picture Doug after the Super Bowl. The degree of which it doesn't have to be nail on the head as Wentz or Todd. It could be in the between them. It could be any quarterback you like. But I think I want to do is track how Jayden did during the season. Now we didn't get to see much, but to me, I think it's a gradable performance. Ben, where would you put Jayden Daniels on the Jayden Daniels dial?
First of all, this is why you're, the producer extraordinaire. I can't wait to see this dial. So I would say this. I can't say RG3 rookie year, because if you say that, the expectations are already high. But you say that, I mean, this is a week where RG3 just got fired by ESPN. Everything about him just is like going the wrong way. I've had so many people tell me they can't stand him with the croissants. I don't even know what's going on. I didn't even see that.
You didn't see the croissant picture?
I've seen them. It's ridiculous. Okay. Anyway, Oh, look at that. There we go. If you're
There you go.
watching the video, you can
Yeah.
see the dial. Wow. Again, what
I
lot of
made this is third quarter. This is how I spent my third quarter.
oh,
Wentz is kind of hit in, but that's fine. I hope
yeah.
we never have to activate the Wentz part of the dial.
So I would just say this. I won't put him equal to RG3 rookie year, but that is basically where I would put it. I mean, we've only seen him play 3 series. Of course, I've watched practice, but we haven't seen enough. Even with RG3, as exciting as it was that opening game, you're like, oh my Lord, like what? Like this is unbelievable. And then it just kind of kept going. So I would put him like right there. He's to me done everything that like I've been impressed. I'm not easily impressed, or at least I'm not one to gush a lot, and I'm still trying to dial it back here. But it's hard for me to find too much to criticize. And the athleticism is obviously off the charts. The ball accuracy is pretty damn good. Is it going to stay healthy? We'll see, and all these things. But I think I'll go right up to the RG3 line, but not completely. Like on like it's not somewhere right before the RG3, but not quite there.
So he's Jeff George.
Oh my
That good,
god.
right?
Oh my god.
I mean, that's the thing. Like, I think it's debatable to put whether it should be Wentz or Gus Frerotte running
I don't know.
uh
Gus Frerotte was legit. I mean, since if we're talking like
legit.
rookies, Heath Schuler would probably be a good one because of all the number one picks that I've had that have bombed, at least RG3 had the one really good year. Schuler, people seem to know he was over in training camp.
Yeah, I think if you did rookies, RG3's like the top echelon, of course. You have somewhere in that mix, Patrick Ramsey and Jason Campbell like being sort of like the mushy middle, and then Heath Schuler being the bottom tier of it. Yeah, I'm gonna fully. I can't put something on the dial. I mean, my excitement levels past Doug Williams, just because I'm just so excited to see it. I'm excited to see it every week. That's partly why I want him to be healthy, because I feel like even if this team is competitive with like Mariota because Jayden's hurt, it will feel it will feel so unsatisfying if like Jayden gets knocked out in like the way that Anthony Richardson did, right? Like the Colts were competitive. The Colts almost went to the playoffs last year with Gardner Minshew. And now the Colts fans are really excited because they have a decent team with this young quarterback. My number one thing, like all I care about is protecting Jayden Daniels. That's all, that's all I want to see at the moment. Um, any other thoughts on the did we miss anything?
I mean, obviously with a 90 player roster, there's so many different things, but the starters didn't play a ton. We didn't really talk a ton about the offensive line, other than you mentioned Wiley, but it didn't appear to be that they were giving up a ton of pressure to when Jayden was in there. The rest of it, so be it. But there's obviously a lot of questions. Is when Brandon Coleman, he's still out. We don't know how long he's going to be out for. If he comes back, if he can get back, say next week, I'm not suggesting that's happening, but if he could get back next week, then they've got a few weeks for him to build up to that momentum again. And then if they decide he's the guy, put him at left tackle, and then maybe Lucas supplants Wiley, or you pick one of them there. Other than that, there's only so much that they can do. And like I said, I think the front seven of the defense has looked pretty good, except that we haven't seen them for real. But in the two joint practices, the defensive tackles in the front general has looked, on top of their game. So I think that bodes well. One thing we didn't mention, you know, there wasn't much to discuss in the passing game. Tua didn't play a ton. He was 5 for 5, and he had a touchdown pass over Benjamin St-Juste, but that was about it. Um, we didn't hear about Forbes at all, and I mean that in the best possible way. Like he was not a factor. That to me is still just such a massive question. Do they have enough at cornerback? And you look at the first few games. They're gonna have some tough competition. Every team has at least one receiver that scares you. So I think that's the bigger deal. And we at this point may not have any answers to anything else in terms of starters until we get to week 1, because I don't know how many of these guys are playing next game. And even if they do, what's New England showing? New England's not a good team, and they're probably sitting starters too. So we will see. But no, I think we hit everything for the most part. And this was a great debut for you as the a part of this post game phenomenon here on the Last Man Standing podcast.
Yeah, I can't wait until we um do this in New Orleans in mid-February. You know what I mean? Super Bowl or bust. That's how I view the season. No, um, I think the one thing I'm wondering is those batch of injuries that you were talking about. How serious are those batch of injuries? We're going to start seeing more and more information about those players or where their futures are headed, and some of those people are important. So, it was funny about the defense that they kept running. The Commanders kept running basically cover two, and the Dolphins kept hitting the soft spot in like the sidelines on a cover two that like Michael Davis would go and cover the flat, and Derek Forrest wasn't like really getting over there. They hit like two passes in a row, and I was like, all right, well, this is preseason junk. And I hope it is, because if that's how the defensive backs are playing, it's not gonna be good. It's not gonna be good. Yeah, Ben, thank you so much. This was a pure dream to be here.
All right. Well, Mike, you rock. At Mike Smeltz on X or Twitter, of course. LinkedIn. He's the king of LinkedIn. Go follow him. Go hit him up over there. And of course, thanks everybody for checking out the podcast. While we were doing this, you saw me, I'm playing around on my phone. I was dealing with, I just filed a story, blah, blah, blah. Anywho, story is online. You can check that out whenever you wake up in the morning. My thoughts on this game, some of which you've just heard, but some other stuff as well. And of course, for this podcast, the Last Man Standing podcast, again, just a reminder, if you're listening on the Standing Room only feed, appreciate it, but that feed's going away after the New England game. So we got just over a week before that goes away. In the interim, if you haven't yet, hit the subscribe button for the Last Man Standing podcast. If you have a moment to drop a rating and review, that helps a ton too. And again, look forward to rocking and rolling with this thing. We're gonna begin putting up more videos of these podcasts on YouTube as well. I got to figure out how to do it. I got to resituate my room here a little bit. Like I wanted some water, but like I don't know. Am I allowed to drink? You tell me, producer. Am I allowed to drink on the video?
No, you're not allowed to. No, don't eat croissants or drink water on video. That's the moral of the story.
All right, well, we'll have to work on that.
I do like this background. This is a good, safe background, Ben, that you got. It's nice, good.
Oh, so fantastic! Look, there's the football behind me.
Yeah, it's very nice. Is it signed by you?
No, it's signed by the 1983 Redskins. After it's the team that lost in the Super Bowl to the Raiders, but it still has all the main people. I've said this before, but like I had Doc Walker on my podcast one day, and I looked over at the ball, and his signature is like a big signature. It's face staring me in the face as I'm talking to him. It was bizarre. All right, Mike, greatly appreciate it. Thanks for everyone here for this. We'll keep this momentum going into the New England game and then to the regular season. But that is it for now. Ben Standig and Mike Smeltz signing off. Until next time.